Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Before we get started with the video, I would like to apologize for having taken an extended break from making videos. It's been, I believe, 5 or 6 days now since I've last uploaded a video to the channel, and I regret to inform you all that I have pneumonia. So I have been pretty much bedridden for the last week or so. If you remember the videos, I guess they were the last couple of videos I posted, so maybe there's not too much to remember, but I've been saying that I haven't been feeling all that well. And turns out it was just, the onset of pneumonia. So that being said, I've been really under the weather. I still am very, very sick, but I decided that I'm going to try and make a video so long as I have the wherewithal and the energy to produce a video during the day. I might not be returning to regular daily uploads for at least a couple more days just because I feel like I need to get back into the swing of things, but today I woke up and I had just a little bit more energy than I have had over the last couple of days, and I've really been itching to look at some Bach. Videos have become such a core part of my daily routine that I've been really wanting to get back on the horse and making more content for the channel. I've been really eager and excited to get to do that, or get back to doing that is. And it's been really difficult just laying in bed. But I have been productive. I have been converting my previous analyses to digital form for me to have notes for my upcoming website or webpage that's going to be an extension of my website that's detailed all of my findings so far. And I've also gone back and corrected a couple of my analyses that I'll go over in a later video at some point, probably months and months down the road, but still I have lots of things that have been starting to percolate as a result of me trying to find things to do as I've been sick. But that being said, that's enough of an introduction. Let's hop into the analysis of Christus, der uns selig macht, which translates to Christ who makes us blessed. Not 100% on that translation because it's not from a source that I typically trust, but hopefully it gets the point across. This chorale is absolutely fascinating, tons of interesting chord progressions. Let's hop right into it. So no sharps or flats are in the key signature. We start on E major and we end on E major, interestingly enough. So I reckon we are in the key of A minor, and we're just starting on 5 chords each time, E major, or starting and ending on 5 chords. So we have E major here, E, B, G sharp, and E, and then another one of the same chords before we get A minor, A, C, A, and E, which is our tonic triad. We then have G, B, B, and E. We have some cross relations here where we have G natural in the bass as opposed to G sharp in the alto, making this a minor dominant 5-6. And this is definitely a modally influenced chorale, so this is more on the lighter sides of modal influence as far as this chorale is concerned. We have a passing tone in the tenor, and forgive me if I take breaths in between sentences that make the sentences feel a little awkward. My lung capacity is like half of what it usually is, and I am just absolutely haggard right now, so I'm really trying to put on my my most presentable YouTube voice and face right now. So forgive me if my delivery is a little all over the place. I'm trying my best. But that being said, 5-6, minor 5-6, mind you, and then we have F, D, A, and D, which is D minor in first inversion, which is a 4-6 chord with a passing tone in the tenor again. We then have E, F, A, and C, which could potentially be a F major 7 chord in third inversion, but I don't think that that's actually what it is. I think this E is an accented non-chord tone or a lower suspension, and then this is actually just turning this into a D minor 7 chord, which is just turning this into root position. A root position 7 chord, so we're just going to change the figure bass. We don't need an 8 there. I don't believe we need 7, 5, and 3 to reflect that. And then our half cadence with the G sharp retained in the alto ends with a 5 chord, E, B, G sharp, and B. Notice how the fifth of the chord is in the melody. Interestingly enough, you might see a pattern with all of the cadences in this chorale. I won't spoil it until we get further in. Okay, so looking ahead, we have a very interesting phrase. We introduce B flat, but at the same time we have G sharp and C sharp, and we have F sharp and C sharp and G natural. So if I saw that key signature, or all of these accidentals that are being used, I really wouldn't know what to make of it. Most likely it is probably some G minor idea with some detonicization going on. But actually the way that I logic this is a direct modulation to the key of D minor. And what I think Bach is doing here is being a little bit clever. Now, there's one thing that I suppose we could analyze this as, is this is a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. So we could call this 1, and in the key of D minor, I think actually it's this F sharp that we need to take into consideration here, because this F sharp, when taken in the grand context of this A minor chord, actually turns it into F sharp minor 7 flat 5 over A, which would be like a 7-6 or a 7-6-5 of 4. So I thought this analysis looked a little strange, just because having a 1 chord look like a 7 of 4 makes more sense when I talk about it, because this F sharp is one of these tones that swaps the quality of the chord. We see Bach do this when he changes one of the voices by step all the time, except for this one has a little bit more drastic of an effect on the chorale. This is not a diatonic chord we're talking about, this is a chromatic chord. So I just called this a direct modulation to D minor, and this is just 7-6 of 4. That's all that I'm going to analyze it as, but do know that A minor is also at the end of the E major chord, so it does resolve where it's supposed to, but the F sharp, I think, supersedes the E in terms of what the chord's function actually is. And then we get G minor, G, B flat, G, and D, which is our 4 chord. And then we have C sharp, B flat, G, and E, which is C sharp fully diminished 7th, that's 7-7. And then we get C sharp, A, F, and E, another one of these interesting suspensions, just like we had here before our cadence. That would make this a 5-6-5 chord, A7 over C sharp. Or, I'm sorry, there's no G in this chord, so this would not be an A7 chord, this would just be an A major triad over C sharp. So we have 7 going to 5. 7 going to 5, 2 dominant chords following one another, not really a progression. I've talked about this in the past, it's more like a static series of chords because their functions are the same, and it also kind of takes away from the progressional quality of a chord progression when the chords are a third apart, because the majority of the notes are intact across the 2 beats. The only real difference is the B flat and the A. Otherwise the chords are pretty much identical, right? But that being said, after our 5-6 chord, we are looking for a point to go back to the key of A minor, because we have another half cadence here where we end the phrase on E major, and I do reckon it's this D minor chord here, D, A, F, and D, which is our tonic triad, and also our subdominant in the key of A minor. Then we get A, E, and C, which is our tonic triad in the key of A minor. And then we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, E, and B. So a quick turnaround back to the key of A minor after this phrase in the key of D minor. Still trying to resolve what the best way to analyze something like this is, because really it is this single voice here that swapping the 2 tones does make it a little difficult to discern really what's happening here, but I do think the grand scheme of things is that the following phrase is in the key of D minor, and that's what the analysis is going to ultimately reflect. Great, so we're going to move ahead to the next phrase, which kind of does the inverse. We're going to stay in the key of A minor and then eventually move to D major for our half cadence at the end. We have another phrase that goes from 5-1 here at the beginning. Remember, the 7-6 of 4 is still pretty much a 1 chord. The chords are similar. We even have the notes of a 1 chord on the downbeat. It's just this F sharp changes the grand picture, the grand scheme. But we do have our tonic triad here, A, C, E, and A minor. Then we get G sharp, B, E, and B, that's E major over G sharp, or 5-6, and then we get A minor again, A, E, and C, tonic triad, passing tone in the tenor, then we get F, C, F, and A. This is a very beautiful moment in the chorale. This is a 6 chord with a passing tone in the tenor. Again, see kind of a similar pattern here, just a little displaced. It's almost as if this E was supposed to be a pickup, but instead we have a complete measure, which is kind of interesting. But we have this pattern here in the tenor, which is similar to the pattern that we have here in the verse phrase. We then get C sharp, E, E, and A. Oh, apologies, it's probably likely that this F major chord is our common chord between A minor and D minor, where it is now our 3 chord, because we then have a C sharp here, and this doesn't really sound like a modulation that, I don't know, to me, like I said, this presents a modulation zone. This D minor could be the point where we've modulated, or this F major chord. I think anywhere in this zone is a chord that's contributing to the modulation, therefore it could be analyzed as the point at which we swap sides. But I'm going to say we do it over this F major chord. We then have C sharp, E, E, and A. That's a 5-6 chord, A major over C sharp, passing 7th in the melody. And then we have D, A, D, and F, which is our tonic triad, D minor going to A major, A, C sharp, and E, another 5 chord. Okay, looking ahead, we have another half cadence in the key of D minor, but interestingly enough, I believe we're going to be going to D minor through F major. Just this first progression feels so F major-like to me. I don't really know how to make sense of it entirely, but we will try our best. So we start off with 5 going to 1 here, this D minor chord. We've had this idea of the previous phrase going to a 1 chord each time. Again, this is also a 1 chord, just to analyze it as a direct modulation, although it's kind of like a hybrid between direct and common chord because there's elements of both. But yeah, this 1 chord in the key of F major is going to be our 6 chord, D minor. We then get C, C, E, and G, which is our 5 chord, C major. And then we go to a very interesting chord. This chord is unusual. We have E flat here, but this is an F major chord with an E flat, F, C, E flat, and A. That's an F7 chord. And in the key of F major, that would be 5-7 of 4, because F is the dominant of B flat, and B flat is our 4 chord. But where we go is not where we would expect to go. We immediately start a chromatically ascending bass line while also continuing our chromatic descending line here in the alto, because we have E natural, E flat, D here, and we have F, F sharp, G here. So when chromaticism is involved in like a stepwise fashion, we know that Bach is definitely doing something interesting. So we have 5-7 of 4 here. And we go to F sharp, C, D, and A. This is D7 over F sharp, which is 5-6-5 of 2. So what is Bach doing? Setting up a 4 chord and then going to 2 presumably, right? G, B flat, D, and G. That's our 2 chord. That's G minor. Well, if we omit this secondary dominant chord here, if we just redact it and we just have the progression of 5-7 of 4 going to 2, that is a roundabout way of saying a deceptive progression in terms of B flat major. Now, F is the 5 chord in the key of B flat, G minor is the 6 chord in the key of B flat, so saying 5-7 of 4 and going to 2 is just a secondary deceptive progression, which is really interesting. So this secondary dominant is just an intermediary chord, a passing chord in between the deceptive progression. I think that that's the best way to make sense of it. And even though we have more chords in the context of maybe B flat major in this progression, that this progression, even though this E flat, makes the function of this F chord undeniably dominant, the expectations we have after we hear this progression is to land on an F major triad, just its function changes. So I do feel like we are still in the realm of F. It is possible that we are in the key of B flat and then we go to D minor, but to me this phrase speaks so much more in the key of F with some wonky chromaticism than it does in the key of B flat, to me, personally. So if you chose to analyze this in the key of B flat major, if you chose to stay in the key of D minor, I think that's also very valid. But just know that if we analyze this in the key of B flat, chances are we'd have an analysis that looks a little prettier on the page, but still, this F7 chord going to this F7 chord at the end of this phrase that we've heard or have seemingly heard in Bach many times up until this point, where we would just expect a major triad at the end of this 3-chord sequence, is subverted by this E flat. It's very unusual, and I think that that is ultimately a comment on a lot of the unusual quirks about this chorale in general. So sounds like F major to me. The melody is definitely F major. So I just feel like the harmony is Bach's wacky, one of Bach's wacky inventions, not to be confused with his actual inventions, like the pieces, the 2-part inventions, but this is just a really unusual, very interesting, very fascinating. So after our G minor chord, which I do believe is our gateway back to the key of D minor, it is now our 4 chord. We have some more ascending chromaticism. Actually, it's started with this F chord, it starts with the F chord and then goes all the way up to A. But we have some passing, we have a passing tone here in the tenor before we get F sharp D D and G sharp D D and F sharp. This is an incomplete. This is an F natural. Apologies, G sharp D D and F natural. This is an incomplete 7/7 chord of 5 because G sharp's the leading tone to A, and A is our 5 chord. And then we get 5 A, C sharp, and E. Had to talk at length about that phrase because it was so interesting. But we're going to hop into the next phrase, the second system, which I do believe starts off with just a direct modulation back to the key of A minor, because we have this cross relationship here between the C sharp and the C, apologies, there's no C natural here, but going from, we do go to the key of A minor, but it's not a direct modulation. I analyzed this chord wrong in my notes. This is, for starters, we're going to end interestingly in a half cadence in the key of G major, but we're going to resolve our 5/1 like we've had pretty much in every phrase beginning up until this point, but this is going to be our gateway back to the key of A minor. It's now 4/6 before we get E, B, E, and G sharp, which is our 5 chord, E major, with a passing 7th in the bass, and then we get C, C, E, and A, which is our tonic triad, A minor in root position, first inversion. And then we are looking for a point where we're eventually going to go to the key of G major, and I do believe that we're going to go to G major sooner rather than later, but we have some melodic minor here in the alto, which makes me feel like it happens around here. So we start with B, D, F sharp, and B, and where this could be a 2 chord in root position, a 2 minor chord because of this F sharp. I think this F sharp's an accented non-chord tone, and this is actually G sharp diminished over B, or a 7/6 chord, and if you're familiar with this pattern, 1/6 going to 7/6, you'll know it's on the other side, A, E, A, and C. That's right, it's a tonic triad. We've seen this pattern countless times in Bach, and I do believe this is our gateway to G major. It is now our 2 chord. And interestingly, we do go from 2 to 1, B, D, G, and B. And this is a 1/6 chord, and typically we don't see 2 going to 1. It's an unusual progression in Bach. When we see 2 go to 1, there's usually something veiling it. There is some type of ambiguity. The 2 chord isn't always fully intact, or the 1 chord isn't fully always intact. I would say the one thing that's I guess sort of veiling this is the fact that the 2 chord is a common chord between the 2 keys, and Bach is sort of sneaking up on us with the cadence, right? Because every phrase except for the first phrase has had a key change at the cadence for the most part, right? If not in the last 2 or 3 beats of the phrase, in the last 3 or 4 beats of the phrase. So it gets turned around quickly and 2 goes to 1. It also goes to 1 in first inversion, so we're seeing we're not seeing both chords in root position here. It's a relatively, like, it's a stretch, I guess that's the right way to refer to it. But yeah, 2 going to 1, kind of an unusual progression. You don't see it a ton in Bach as clearly as you do here, so it's kind of a rare occurrence. But we have another passing tone here in the bass before we get D, D, F sharp, and A. That's our 5 chord in the key of G major. Next we have probably our most interesting phrase in the entirety of the chorale. We have a phrase that is sort of our counterpart to the second phrase, where the melody is the exact same at this point. Bach's harmonization is just as unusual. We have B flat as well as C sharp again, but we have E flat to start the phrase off. And for the life of me, I don't know what that E flat is doing there, other than to say that even though I do believe we are in the key of D minor, I think we could also say that we're in the key, kind of in the realm of D Phrygian because of this E flat. What the E flat effectively does, it lowers the second scale degree, or the second tone in the pitch collection, and leaves us with a 7 chord that's spelled C, E flat, and G. And when you look at this phrase through the lens of some type of D Phrygian, we have a 7 chord that's in first inversion, that's also minor, which is really unusual to see. We typically expect the lowercase 7 chords to have like a G flat, right? Because of the well, we would expect a 7 chord to have a C sharp and an E natural, or just a C natural and the rest of the notes natural as well. But no, we have a C minor triad here, and I think this E flat is just like an upper leading tone, like it's functioning the same way as the C sharp, but it's from above, so half step down below. And as a result, when it's taken with the rest of the tones that are surrounding it, right, C, G, and C, we're left with a C minor triad, and that is an artifact of the D Phrygian mode, even though Bach pretty quickly reverses course after the fact, because after our 7 chord, we go to G minor over D, D, B flat, G, and D, which is a 4-6-4 chord. This is a passing 6-4 chord, so that's a 4-6-4, kind of unusual, but still we're seeing it, and that's fine. 7 going to 4 is a transitive progression, but I don't even really know how relative it is to talk about a transitive progression at this point, because we're in the Phrygian mode, and that's unusual. But immediately afterwards, we reintroduce that leading tone, and then we get E natural pretty quickly after, which just erases that E flat from our brain. It's like we hear it, we're like, that sounds a little flat, and that's because it is, and that's really unusual. I wonder what Bach's true intention was. Maybe there's something that he knows about this melody, or that he knew about this melody that we don't, or that I don't, I guess. But yeah, some Phrygian influence here. We have the modality sneaking in more ways than just the minor 5 chord here earlier, but yes, we have C sharp, A, G, and E, which is our A7 chord over in first inversion. That's 5-6-5, and then we go to D minor, D, A, F, and E. This E, I think, is a suspension, which makes me, it's interesting because this F was sort of the suspended tone here in the second phrase. Now the E is functioning like a suspension. We have the D, the A, and the F, and we also have the E reiterated here in the bass, and it is quite possible that this is like an F major 7 chord with this D as an accented non-chord tone, but I feel like the melody here is being leveraged as some sort of suspension. That's just what it sounds like to me. You can go back and listen to the chorale as well, or sync through the voices here, or try and audiate them yourself, but this E really does sound like a 9/8 suspension to me that resolves in the next measure. But I'm going to call this a 1 chord with a 9/8 suspension in it. This is a very unusual chorale. We then have F, A, F, and D. That's taking our D minor chord and putting it in root position, or sorry, first inversion, and I did not mention this earlier, but I do believe this is another half cadence, and I think we're moving to the key of C major. I know we have an F sharp here, but I think that we're moving to the key of C major, and this is a half cadence in the key of C major, just to continue along with all of the half cadences we've had up until this point. But yeah, this would be a 2-6 chord in the key of C major. If we were moving to the key of G major, we would have F natural, and I know that we would have F sharp, but this F sharp right here could also be in the key of C major, not as a diatonic tone, but as a secondary leading tone. This G and this B here kind of gives us a passing 5-7 chord, which I will mark because we have not had a lot of subdivisions of the beat yet, but here feels pretty intentional because it's the first time in the chorale, I believe, up until this point that we've had two voices moving at the same time, and one of them is the bass, so that feels significant to me. And then we go to A, C, E, and C, which is like a 6 chord, right? It's like A minor, which is like a deceptive progression, similar to this chord that we had here, but the chord is being recontextualized as a chord preceding a G triad, so I feel like this is just being borrowed and repurposed as a different functioning chord, which is really unusual. But I think this E is the accented non-chord tone here, and this is actually F sharp, A, and C, which is F sharp diminished in first inversion, which would be 7/6 of 5. F sharp, because F sharp's the leading tone to G, and then we get our 5 chord G, D, G, and B. That's the way that I hear it. I've heard all of these cadences so far as half cadences. That's just me, though. Okay, moving ahead, I think we have a direct modulation to A minor. I suppose you could analyze this as a common chord modulation, but these feel like separate ideas to me. And you know what? When we have F sharp immediately after a G chord, it does feel like maybe we had a little bit of a connection between these two, right? Because D is the dominant to G. But I just can't help but hear this F sharp as more so part of what's happening after the fact, rather than something that's connected to something that's connected to the G before it. So this is, even though the G chord is being followed by its own dominant, remember the G is already the dominant of this context here, so I don't think that this D is really at all related to this G, more than just, coincidence. So F sharp, D, A, and A. I do think this is a harmonization of melodic minor. We have melodic minor here in the bass. That's D major over F sharp, which is a major 4 chord in first inversion, passing 7th in the tenor as well, before we get G sharp, B, E, and B. That's E major over G sharp, or 5-6. We see this pattern from time to time in Bach, 4-6, 5-6, and then we would expect 1 here, A, E, and C. It's our tonic triad, A minor, root position, and we're looking for a point to go to the key of D minor for another half cadence here, and I think it's going to be in this sort of turnaround style where the phrase ends in a key that it did not start in, and the modulations introduced in the later portion of the phrase. But we do go, after this passing tone in the tenor, to another A minor chord, A, C, E, and A. No need to reanalyze. Before we get some passing tones in the lower voices again, 2 of them happening here, but I don't really think there's anything to analyze here. We have B, D, E, and A. That would be some type of sus chord. I don't really know how one would analyze that. But here we're looking for a point in which we move to the key of D minor. This A minor could be a common chord between the two of them, but for me, I feel like part of this ascending section, this is going to be a cadence that's really, or a modulation that's very quick in front of the cadence. We have C sharp, E, A, and A, which I'm going to analyze as 5-6 of 4. A major over C sharp is A is the dominant of D, and D is our 4 chord, and we get, after this passing 7th in the melody here, we have D, A, D, and F, which is our 4 chord, and it also happens to be our tonic in the key of D minor, before we go to A major, A, C sharp, and E. Not only do we have a bunch of half cadences which are really, prolonging our sense of resolution. I guess the resolution does happen on the next beat, after each phrase. The fact that there are so many strung together and we're getting them in new keys each time is very interesting. Very, very interesting. But in a similar fashion to how we ended our first system here, we are going to, in my opinion, go to the key of F major. We have D minor here, which D, A, D, and F is the resolution of our A major chord. I do think in the key of F major, it is our sixth chord, and we're going to have a similar progression that we ended our first system with. However, we're going to cadence in the key of A minor. We're going to get a resolution that I feel like strengthens, now that we have context later in the chorale, it strengthens my analysis earlier. I don't think this is in the key of B flat, because we get a similar version of the same melody here with a near identical progression, but we don't have the E flats going on. So we have 6 going to 5, C, C, E, and G. It's our dominant. And then we go to F, F, C, F, and A, which is our tonic triad, no E flats. Passing tone in the bass. Then we get A, C, F, and A, which is our F major chord. Inversed inversion, we'll just change the figured bass. Then we have B natural, which makes me feel like we are now out of the realm of F major. So maybe we could say that this is the point where we modulate. Yeah, I think that is where I'm going to say that we modulate. I said we modulated later, but this B natural here makes me feel like we're already sort of thinking in terms of A minor by this point. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but yeah, this passing tone feels more consequential than it might seem to be. So we're going to call this a 6/6 chord in the key of A minor, and we're going to get a bit of a transitive progression here, C, C, E, and G, which is our 3 chord in the key of A minor. Originally I had said that this was our 5 chord in the key of F, and it is now our 3 chord. But, you know, potato potato, 6 of one, half dozen another. It's a modulation zone, right? So there we have multiple chords that are diatonic between the 2 keys. It does not matter. However, this C feels less dominant than anything else because we have B natural. For the same reason why now I'm seeing this B natural here, it just looks like we're dealing with an A minor pitch collection rather than an F major pitch collection here. That's just my opinion. You could even analyze this D in the key of F major as well. It's a zone. So long as you identify the fact that there is a modulation that has occurred here, that's what matters the most. The point at which you say it happens is, in most cases when there's a zone like this, it's not as important. But then after our 3 chord, we have D, A, D, and F, which is our 4 chord, some adjacent harmony, 3 going to 4, that's pretty normal. And then our chorale ends on 5, E, G sharp, D, and E, which is, I guess, technically a 5/7 chord, but this D kind of has more of a trajectory of this B here, which is going to spell our final 5 chord, E, G sharp, B, and E. But in between this 5/7 chord and this 5 chord, we have E, A, C, and E, this passing, not uppercase 1, but rather lowercase 1, 6/4 chord, A minor over E, and that is going to conclude today's analysis. Wow, I was not expecting a chorale this interesting. I don't know why I wasn't. I didn't have any reason to disbelieve that I would have a chorale this interesting, but seeing as this video is as long as it has been, I think I'm getting to the point where I could start making videos again with more regularity, which makes me very happy because it's become, like I said, part of my routine to the point where I was really missing it. I was jonesing to make another video for the YouTube channel, and here I am doing so, and hopefully I did not disappoint. There were some points in the chorale that are just unusual, like, you know, is this a direct modulation, or is this just one case where a chord is just being recontextualized and it is in fact functioning the same way that all of these other ones are, just as this little nuance here to smooth the transition a little more so than what's not necessarily needed in the other phrases. But that being said, we have some very clear modal, not modular, modal influence here with this E flat going on, as well as the minor dominant that we had earlier, but still the D Phrygian influence here is absolutely undeniable. But other than that, I really can't complain about the chorale being anything more than functionally harmonic. We do have this interesting progression here of a secondary deceptive progression that's interrupted by another secondary dominant chord that is resolved, but the first one isn't. Very unusual. And the chorale is exclusively half cadences, so that is also very unprecedented. Add that bracket there between the 1, 6, 4 and the 5 chord as well. The fact that it doesn't resolve is also very unusual, but that just goes to show Bach's relationship with the harmony is very fluid and was, it changed based on the context that was necessary to harmonize the melody and evoke the feeling that he needed to. But regardless, if you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit the notification icon so you get a notification of when my daily upload goes live. I would love to have you along the journey, and also like the video if you liked the video. It would really help the channel out a lot. The channel's growing like crazy. I slept for like 3 days and then I woke up and I had 10 new subscribers. Absolutely wild. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means the world to me. But with all of that being said, I think I'm going to cap my video off. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow or maybe a couple days down the road. It really just depends on how I'm feeling and what my lungs are feeling like. But I look forward to next analysis, and I hope you take care.